Well, this on-again, off-again spring weather is starting to present problems for some farmers across our region. Just when we dry out for a few days and we get some field work done, then another blast of rain blows into town and planting goes on hold for another several days until soils dry out and we get back in the fields again. Purdue Extension corn expert Dr. Dan Quinn is keeping an eye on all of it, and he joins us now. Dan, last week we got about 3 days, and guys really made some good progress. We went from 8% planted on corn here in the state up to 20%, so some real nice progress. But now we're down again, and it doesn't look like we're going to get, more than about a day or two in between weather systems over the next 10 days or so. Are you starting to get worried?
No, I'm not getting worried yet. I've been reminding folks it's still at the beginning of May. So, if it was May 29th, I'm getting a little worried.
Yeah.
But it's really been where you're at in the state. And that's something that's been pretty interesting from our end is that, central Indiana, kind of where campus is at in Purdue and West Lafayette, we've kind of missed a lot of the rain. So there's guys planting, and there's some folks that I know they're actually pretty close to being done.
Wow.
And then there's parts of northern Indiana, more so I'd say southern Indiana, that have caught a lot more of the rains, and they're kind of getting a little more anxious. So it's really been interesting, the variability and where the planting progress is at throughout the state.
Yeah, well, boy, here in Northeast Indiana, we've had more than our share of rain. One of the issues that it hasn't just been the rain, but temperatures have been kind of up and down as well, and that seems to maybe have kept soils on a little bit on the cool side. The question is, cool enough to be a problem?
I don't think we're at that point where they're cool enough to be a problem, and I think, the areas that have been wet and maybe a little bit cooler, I think one of the good things is maybe a lot of those acres haven't been planted. The acres that have been planted, we've had some moisture, but temperatures has been, up, and, the soil temperatures have been a little bit higher, where we've actually seen some good emergence happening. Nothing that really stands out to us in terms of issues. If you get seed in the ground where, it stays cool, it stays wet, and that seed just sits in that soil for a while and we're not hitting that emergence, then, some of those issues start popping up for us in terms of, seedling diseases are often the big ones. Majority of the farmers today use seed treatments, and those seed treatments tend to last about 21 days or so. So they do have some level of protection. But a lot of the acres that have been planted, a lot of that crop is coming up, and we've had pretty adequate soil temperatures that really haven't caused any of those issues to pop up on us.
So you're not expecting any issues, any disease issues or anything like that you're watching carefully right now?
Yeah, nothing, in terms of reporting or, anything coming into Purdue diagnostic labs or anything like that. We just haven't had a lot of issues pop up on us. Yeah. And I think a lot of it has to do with that, a lot of the crop that is planted and has come up has been in warm soil temperatures.
Well, good news there. When planting comes a bit later than ideal, kind of like right now, and I get your point about it only being the first part of May. So we do have a ways to go. But as we get later and later and later, do you recommend any changes like seeding populations or anything?
We typically don't recommend any changes in seeding population. Often the reason behind that is that, when we get kind of delayed in planting, what we often see is soil temperatures are actually much higher as we get later, and we actually typically see a lot better emergence. So you typically don't need to adjust your populations. Now, when we get pretty late, you think about the central and really the northern parts of Indiana, when we start getting into late May and, that J word.
Don't say it.
Then we start thinking about, hybrids. Do we need to change that maturity of those hybrids? So if we get, especially northern Indiana, you get into that late May, early June there, then we start getting a little concerned about, hey, maybe change our hybrids so that our maturity is short enough so that we can get that crop to finish before that first fall freeze date. Some of the other concerns too is with delayed planting is you get the stress tolerance of those hybrids, the disease packages of those hybrids, because a lot of times when we plant a little bit later, those crops end up hitting more of the critical growth stages in areas where we may see more disease or more insect pressure later in the season. So those are important aspects to pay attention to.
Well, we sure appreciate you keeping an eye on this stuff for us. Dan Quinn, Purdue Extension corn expert. Always appreciate an opportunity like this to catch up with you and see what's on your mind. So we'll check back in with you a little bit later in the season, okay?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Podcasts by Federated Media.